and welcome. We got to talk about your favorite dessert. We answered any of the questions that you may have. We had a guest speaker, our librarian, who went over um, our topics and how to search any topics. And I don't think we're going to have any time for small group discussions today, just because there was a lot of questions, which is fine. I want you to feel ready. So if you didn't get her name, this is her name. And like she said, she's going to be visiting other classes. So if you're taking multiple classes, make sure you play around with some of the things that she mentioned today. Like I said, I think our class was one of the first classes that she visited. So you're going to have an opportunity to ask her some specific questions when you see her again in other classes. So, okay, so each module, it covers 2 weeks, meaning module 1 was week 1 and 2. Module 2 is for week 3 and 4. So the readings that are covered are for 2 weeks at a time. So I usually start pretty slow just to get everyone ready to be in the same on the same page to ensure that you feel comfortable reading some of the literature in a different discipline. Like I said, what Erin mentioned and what Carlos is mentioning, that you see her every day, which is wonderful. Like I said, she's a wonderful resource, and every location or every academic institution that I have worked at, I am usually BFFs with the librarian, just because they know how to find information. And one of the key things that you're going to discover is, because we have so much information out there, that it's going to be very important to verify and also have someone who can work with you to ensure that you have the best information and references for your topic. Okay, so in module 2, we're going over not only organization, but culture and technology. The next assignment that's going to be due, that's part of, it's all building up. Your assignment 1 and 2, the grades have been released. And I gave you specific comments for all of your work. Some of you may need for assignment 2 for the peer review, if you could just make sure that you review some of the APA citations to ensure that you understand how to cite it well, especially if you're not going to use RefWorks or Reference Manager. It's always good to make sure that you can double check. Like what our librarian said, it may actually give you information, but as humans, like AI, any of the tools that we're using, we're the last check. So you have to just go back. You have to know the rules of APA to ensure that it is doing it correctly. So for today's class, what I want to do is to talk about, how do you address the technology aspect of the organization? One of the key things that we all saw was the fact that we're very interested in introducing new technology, augmenting new technology to optimize, streamline, etc., of the work process, workflow, things that are in the workplace at this moment. And one of the things that we have to do is we need to make sure that you understand the culture and the impact on employee behavior. We have to look at strategies to align technology initiatives. So for instance, I know one of my specialties is telehealth. And to all of you, especially after the pandemic, you're like, oh, no, duh, telehealth sounds really amazing. However, before the pandemic, people thought, why do you need this, added, virtual thing when you could go see a doctor? No one has really, encountered that pandemic. And also for the aging or the elderly population, or baby boomers who are 65 and over, they can't really drive to some of the specialty doctors, as well as those who live in rural areas. Specialty doctors are not available. A lot of times the best specialty doctors are located in major cities, and it's expensive to get consultations. So like I said, it sounds like a great idea, but however, the culture may be very different. So you need to have practical scenarios to apply these strategies. So, like I said, if it wasn't for the pandemic, the telehealth aspect of it, although the military and the VA was using it for their healthcare, it was not easily accepted by rest of the world, meaning everyone had that traditional thought of going to the doctors. And also, not to mention policies. Each state has different policies on using telehealth. So, for instance, you can't really see a patient unless through using telehealth, unless you've seen them in person. And also, the physician or the healthcare provider has to have practicing license in that state. Unless you are a federal employee or you're working for the military or VA, that doesn't apply. However, for the civilian world, all those different policies actually came into play until public health emergency came along due to the pandemic, which lifted a lot of the state laws that allowed the telehealth to come through, which was a new technology. So you probably have seen this in module 2. I have given you different scenarios just because all of you are coming from education, different organization, government agency, nonprofit, entrepreneurship, or small business owners, as well as some of the other organizations that are corporate in different sectors. So and of course, due to time, I'm not going to ask you to answer any of my questions, but just think of the higher education. So let's say it's a small liberal college that is adopting a new faculty evaluation software. So we want to just make sure that we are evaluating not just students, but faculty, because it's important for faculty members to be up to date in how to teach, right? To give that information. So college prides itself on community-based culture. Members are connected, concerned that software will replace the face-to-face interactions and undermine openness and collaboration, which is the same sentiment that everyone had before the pandemic, meaning I know that that I had the opportunity to work at so many different institutions, both face-to-face, hybrid, high flex, online, especially when we were stationed in Europe. I was teaching in person, but also online for military who were in the front lines. For example, they were stationed in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, you name it. But we had internet, so they were able to take those courses. But prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of concern about the quality and also the interaction between faculty online and also in person and high flex hybrid. And that culture it's slowly changing. However, in higher education, conducting things face to face seems to be the gold standard, but it is changing. So what's the cultural challenge? You notice that we're introducing a new software without disrupting its collaborative and community-driven culture. When you introduce new technology, especially if you're looking at AI, a lot of people are very fearful because they are not understanding what it is and also the change of the old culture that's going to replace the new culture, meaning change is very different and difficult for a lot of people. Those of you who moved around a lot or have the way of life where change is part of your life, it's not a big deal just because a lot of times it brings good changes. However, it does bring sometimes growing pains as well. So as you can see, some of the questions that we'll bring up would be, how can colleges ensure that software complements a culture of openness and collaboration? What steps can leadership take to address the faculty concerns? So when you're working on your project, keep in mind, yes, it's a bright idea, but how do you foster that communication? How do you foster that collaboration or maintain that culture, the organization, that culture that exists, or at least acknowledge it before you try to implement something that a lot of people are against or very fearful? Another thing that we talked about is making sure that your leadership is aware and also accepts the innovation that you're trying to um, introduce to the organization. If you don't have the buy-in in the leadership or decision makers, it's not going to work. So some of the solutions, and of course, this is not the best solutions, but one of the things that you have to keep in mind is alignment. So a lot of times I asked you to think about your mission, vision of your own organization to figure out, okay, what is the solution? Are you integrating the software as a supplement to in-person interaction to enhance the feedback? So you have to be very careful with the words that you're using. It's not replacing, it's actually enhancing, right? And you have to make sure that that is the case. The application, of course, is do workshops to demonstrate how softwares can work and streamline the process. I hate to say this, but in higher education, it takes forever, like in government. So you have to convince a lot of people, and also you have to have a wide network of people who will also advocate for this change. So think about your organization and where you fit in the decision-making process. So understanding and aligning with organization culture can actually turn resistance into acceptance, and also helping the organization thrive with new technology. So if you look at a lot of organizations that have gone through a lot of changes, for example, Apple, for instance, they fired their own CEO and he came back and then he died and etc. So there's a lot of changes and turnover. What was once not accepted is accepted. So time will tell, but also your experience and also knowing who to talk to and who to convince to show the value added for this innovation is going to be important. So this is the part where it's going to be important for you to think about. This is the next assignment. I'm asking you to think about the technical assessment. I know that not everyone is an IT expert or technical expert. I have expertise in telehealth, therefore, I know a lot of these proposals, like I said, they're very similar but very different. Like I said, it's always good to work with collaborators. But when you think about technical assessment, especially if you're spearheading this initiative, you have to understand the basics, meaning you have to be able to articulate what's needed. So one of the objectives for the technical assessment is I don't want you to learn Python or IT or help desk or any of those things to be specific expert in areas. I want you to understand the general scheme of things for you to present it to the decision makers and also get money to actually implement some of this. Ideas are great. However, it is not good unless you can implement it. It's just a theory or a nice project to have. But if you can't get the money to implement it, it's not a good idea. So yes, I will. So provide, you need to provide a structured approach to conducting technical assessment that align technology with organization needs, culture, and structure. So when you look at the assessment, I go through each of these steps on what you need to be doing. So the first part that you saw in the workbook is go back to your assignment 1 and think about the mission and vision and the strategy of the organization, right? So one of the key steps that you have to understand when you're pitching any kind of innovation, new programs, it doesn't have to be technical. So this applies, those of you who are interested in program evaluation, it's same kind of similar process, meaning you're evaluating. So you need the baseline, how you're going to evaluate as you move forward during the process, and then also looking at the outcome. What did you achieve by implementing things? So first, you have to understand your organization overview. All of you done an excellent job of describing what your organization is, the mission, and what needs to be done. So the current technological state. So this is your objective and also subjective as well, meaning outside person or external person coming in and looking at your organization, which is going to be very important. So for me, I am new to UIW, meaning I've only been here for about 4 years, going on my 5th year. So my view of UIW is very different from someone who's been here for 10, 15, 20 years, just because I'm coming from a different perspective and different experience. So having internal view as well as external view is going to be important. The technology needs identification. By no means, like I said, it's not a comp sci class or a science engineering class where I'm asking you to tell me what the technical needs are, meaning all the software, hardware, etc. There are components to it, but I want you to get more of a system level. So you're presenting it to the C-suites or people who are making decisions. You want to let them know what is technology needs that you need to accomplish in order to implement this. And then you have to provide solutions and recommendations and implementation. So these are the key steps to any proposal, not just technical assessment, but program evaluation, grants, etc. So any of the programs, especially in public health, if you're implementing public health programs, we go through the same steps. What is a baseline? What do we need to do? How do we change people's behaviors and then sustain them? So one of the introduction to the technical assessment is this is all in your worksheet. So the purpose, what are we doing? We're looking at the current technology infrastructure. We're looking at the gaps and some of the recommendations, and we want to make sure that it aligns with the strategic and operation goals, meaning it may sound really great in your head and also to the outside world. However, it doesn't align with the strategic 5-year plan or things that you have in your mission statement and vision. It's not going to work. So this is critical because new technology needs to fit the organization culture, goals, and structure. Only you who are part of the organization, and hopefully you have a team of people who are working with you, whom you can trust, to kind of bounce those ideas to make sure that you're meeting those goals. The context matters, meaning understanding the type, size, and structure of the organization is going to be very essential. So if you have an organization that is small, sometimes it's easy to implement because it's not going to affect multiple areas of the organization, and it's very agile. So you're able to do a pilot test run and then do a beta testing and then implement it out to the rest of the organization. However, if you have organizations that are huge, like Fortune 100 or 500 companies, it's going to be very difficult to introduce something because there's implications of cost and benefit, meaning there's a lot of people that are going to be affected, and the bottom line profit is going to be very important. So let me talk about the example. I know Aaron was talking about the whole public health crisis right now. Roughly about 60% of the public health government officials are retiring this year in the next 5 years or so. Therefore, what we want to do is integrate AI to enhance, especially the predictive analytics for outbreak monitoring and disease prevention. Up until recently, the contact tracing and things of that nature had to be done by people in the field. So there are people who go out and trace different outbreaks, not just the pandemic, but you have the GI outbreaks, whole bunch of outbreaks that you don't even hear of. There's a lot of outbreaks that are happening, especially in picnics, weddings, birthday parties that you don't hear about, cruise ships. And you need people power to do that, but AI is able to help with that. So the purpose of this technical assessment is to help align this AI integration with departments, goals, culture, and structure, and ensuring successful adaptation and improved public health outcomes. This is just a proposal that I'm kind of working on, just because there's a crisis of public health professionals. The pay is very low. I've worked in the state as a state epidemiologist, and I know that you don't get compensated as well as someone who would go into industry and you're on call 24/7. And so it is a service that you are providing, but at the same time, there's a huge burnout rate just because at the end of the day, people want to be recognized and also be compensated for the work that they're doing. But as you know, when you're working for the state and local governments, funding is really poor. So key areas that you need to kind of look at in any organization is organization structure. So meaning, is it hierarchical? Is it flat? Is it round? So you read that Forbes article that talked about different structures that exist in different organizations, centralized versus decentralized. You also have to look at the organization culture. Organization culture is hard to determine unless you've worked there or you have a trusted advocate or person that's within the organization who's going to tell you about the culture. There's a lot of unwritten rules and things that you will not find as an outside person. Only internal folks will know that this is how it's run. And then stakeholders, identify key stakeholders and their concerns, meaning who are you serving and who are the decision makers altogether. So the example that I gave, and like I said, Erin was doing the same example so we could kind of run it through the lecture, is the type of organization. So if it's a government, if it's public health, the funding is very poor. Every couple of years or every year, we are applying for CDC, NIH, different grants to just sustain the labs, all the structures that we have to run the programs. Department impacted, so I talked about the outbreak investigation. So epidemiology, data analytics, IT, health education, and policy are all affected. We were just talking about predictive analytics for outbreak investigation. So you figured only epidemiologists would be affected. However, as you can see, it's more than that. The culture, we need to make sure it's evidence-based, data-driven decision-making, and public accountability. However, I told you that 60% of the public health professionals are retiring. What does this mean? This means that people are either 65 or older. They're not digital natives, or they have used technology to do the work that we've done over the last couple of years. So there are some concerns about introducing new technology, and it feels like we're replacing, right, people. So there's that culture of fear and also concern, which is rightfully so, because it is still wild, wild west in terms of what we're doing with AI. Key stakeholders, health officers, epidemiologists, data analysts, IT staff, and policymakers. And of course, indirectly, it's going to affect the local community, as well as whoever is making the decisions on the state or local level. So mayor, governor, etc. So the current technological state. So this, in any organization, you have to look at the existing infrastructure of hardware. So what's in place? What are the life cycle of devices? So those of you who are working in your organization, they'll tell you that every 3 years or 5 years, your devices are replaced. So if you don't know it, you can just ask someone, meaning when was the last time you got a new computer? So you're usually on the list to get upgraded into the new software, and this is the life cycle, right? So yes, Carlos, very good point. Like McDonald's replacing cashiers with automated machines, but these still have managers and people in the background if it's not working, right? So software's key applications and systems that are currently used. Of course, there's no way for me to actually double check what the applications or key systems that are currently used in your workplace. You want to do the best you can because you want to write a proposal that is actually practical and you want to submit it somewhere. So right now, what I want you to do is I want you to do some groundwork and some investigation. And that's one of the reasons why it's a worksheet as opposed to I'm asking you to write a beautiful prose of what you find, because that takes a lot of energy and also brain power. What I want you to do in the next couple of weeks is gather information and put it in a coherent format where we can go back and enhance it. Network infrastructure. So what do they use in terms of connectivity? Wired, wireless, cloud-based? Is it very secure, not secure? So some of you may know the basics, but you just want to figure out what is the technological network or the sphere that you're working in, so you can talk about this to the people who have funding to help you to implement it. So for example, so I'm going back and forth in terms of my example to make it more concrete. So going back to the public health example, the hardware, standard desktop servers and cloud storage that you would see in a typical public health government agency, it's not the top of the line at all. It's the bare basics. There are definitely security because we are dealing with people's data, for instance. Also, software is traditional epidemiological software. It has manual entry and basic analytical tools, meaning nothing is really automated. People are inputting things and there's no way to just double check. So it's more of an antiquated system that is not updated because it's too expensive. The network infrastructure, we have the cloud-based system for public health reporting and data. So I know there's a lot of information you probably didn't want to know about public health, but there are some things that you have to report on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or yearly basis, depending on what season it is. Especially during the flu season, if you have flu, you have to report it to CDC through a secure reporting process. So those are some of the examples. So what do you need to do? So as a person who is proposing a new technology, you need to kind of figure out performance issue. Is there a slow system, outdated equipment? What is considered a gold standard in your industry? Meaning in public health, it's not going to be compared to Apple or Microsoft in Silicon Valley as a gold standard because they can't afford it. So what is a gold standard in your field, in your sector? What does that look like? What is a compatibility, integration challenges between software and systems? So for me, when I worked in the state, one of the things that we ran into is the interoperability, meaning the data from the pharmacy, lab, hospitals were not talking to each other. So someone actually had to manually go in and kind of physically look at some of the things, which wasn't efficient. And also it slowed down and it caused a lot of mistakes. So user feedback, meaning people who are using the information can you get some insight from end users? So other epidemiologists or state workers, etc. Are they able to tell you what the pain points are? So the example that I can give you it back to the public health, the same scenario is the performance issue. There's lots of large data sets, but the computing power is low because you can't afford to have systems that have high computing powers because it's way too expensive. So it's slow to respond. And also we're unable to predict pretty quickly because it takes a lot of RAM and power, etc. Compatibility, like I mentioned, the data don't talk to each other just because it's not integrated. So we want to see if we can make that bridge. User-friendly, they're saying that manual data analysis is really time-consuming. They wish that maybe the data could be just entered in automatically and be able to benefit from the automation. So those are some of the pain points, meaning there's not enough time in the day. Is there a way to automate? So technology need identification, what does that mean? So you have to look at the goals of the organization. So I don't know what that's going to look like for each of the organization that all of you identified with. So you need to look at the strategic goals and operation goals. So strategic goals, I don't want you to spend so much time trying to figure out what that means. I want you to just focus on technology support, right? How can you help with this technology, learning technology thing that you're introducing to help with the organization goals? So meaning improve customer experience, saving time for the epidemiologists, et cetera. And what are the operational goals? So you want to focus on efficiency, process improvement, optimization was a great word that Erin mentioned today, and user requirements. So meaning, what are the bare minimum that you need to have for end users and IT staff? So it's great to satisfy the end users or people who are using it, but does it help the IT staff, so informational technology staff? So a lot of times what people think about is they think about this product, but forget that you need to have support that would help you to go along during the implementation and the operation stage. So going back to my example, I want to use AI to leverage the real-time data analysis and predictive modeling for infectious disease outbreaks. So if you look at the literature, they notice that even looking at the social media data, those who, a lot of people just post, especially the younger generation. When you look at those posts, we're able to predict a disease outbreak at least 1 to 2 weeks before the actual outbreak happens, because people are putting in their symptoms and you're able to analyze that with AI. Also, AI-driven insight to enhance public health intervention and resource allocation, meaning you're able to kind of efficiently train the data of train AI to help you to focus on different areas of different outbreaks, different program evaluation, et cetera. So the operation goals right now, the epidemiologists are saying that there's not enough time in the day. We're able to automate the data entry and analytics and create like dashboards very quickly for public health officials as well as policymakers to provide accurate, faster decision-making. So for example, especially during an election year, a lot of the policymakers will come up to the health policy or public health department and ask them to give them an update. They have no health background, but you have to tell them what it is. With so much data, a lot of times people say, I have to go back and I can't give you 100% certainty what it is. And the health policymakers or policymakers get really impatient, meaning, you're an expert. Why can't you tell me what's happening? Because there's so much data and we don't have the computation power to analyze the data pretty quickly, which is not the case anymore. So the end user, for example, epidemiologist needs the tool that's user-friendly. So you have the senior epidemiologist, and then also people who are just starting out where they're not understanding what they're seeing. Therefore, having a ability to analyze the data pretty quickly is going to be very important. Also, IT staff require systems that are easy to maintain and offer robust monitoring tools, meaning the IT folks don't want to just come when there's a problem. They want to monitor and make sure that things are working smoothly. By the time we get to the IT folks with the problem may be bigger. So especially IT folks, and of course I can't speak for them, but from my experience, it's important to work hand in hand to make sure that you're working together to make sure that the technology is performing the way it should and doing the upgrades and also the implementation the way it should be. The key thing here is the cultural and structural consideration. If we're robots, it's a lot easier to kind of push out updates, different changes, etc. But we're human beings with different complex feelings and belonging, organization. Like there's so much out there, it's complex. Therefore, that's why AI can replicate us, hopefully not too far in the future, meaning there's so much to us. It's not just 1 or 2 or 3 dimensions. There's multi-layers of human life that is considered to be the cultural and also structural consideration. So will new technology align with organization culture? Only you can tell me if that works in terms of your own organization. Consider strategies that would ease the adaptation, meaning you need to kind of talk about training, you need to talk about communication. So for example, I know we were talking about RefWorks. Is it easy to learn? There's a steep learning curve, so you're going to have some you're going to have some growing pains and hours of some frustration. But once you learn it, it'll make your life so much easier. Meaning you no longer have to type all your references ever again. It gets formatted for you. Structural fit, how well does the technology align with current organization structure? Would adjustment need to be made? So a lot of times compromises are going to be very important, but also that means that you really have to know your technology, because sometimes what happens is people who are brokering these deals have no knowledge of the technical components. Therefore, they say, oh, that's possible. And you realize it is impossible for the IT folks or technical experts to make those changes because it's just not possible. So, for example, back to the public health one, does it align with the department culture of transparency and accountability? So if you work for the local state or city or the state or the government, yes, we need to talk about how the money is used, what's being done, etc. But any of the technology components to the departments, does it hinder the operation or is it evidence-based? There's also change management. That's one of the reasons why this course is called Organization Change. We have to think about the resistance and why there's resistance. Meaning, is it because they're unfamiliar with AI, because they're afraid that their jobs would be taken away? So you have to understand that it's important to critically provide the training and ongoing support, meaning you're not going to be left behind just because you're older or you don't accept it, etc. So there needs to be reassurance and cultural fit, meaning the AI system should integrate smoothly with the department's existing cloud, or if they're updating things, it has to kind of streamline into the system without causing a lot of delays and also headaches. When you have these possible innovation and technology tools, it's going to be very important to give different solutions, meaning consider different technology solution and weigh their pros and cons. So option 1, option 2, a lot of times people give usually about 3 options, no more than that. If you give too many options, people can't decide. So one of the examples, so going back to the public health example, is option 1, AI enhanced predictive analytic platform. So it's bells and whistles, it's high cost, real-time analytics, it's customizable, but automated data. However, it, like I said, lots of money, and it requires significant staff training. So that's option 1. Option 2 is open source all AI tool. It's low cost. You can customize it, but the limitation is limited tech support. Also, there's security risk, just because we want to make sure that the public health data is secure, but it's open source. So more effort is going to be required to integrate with the existing system and also future plans. But that's so high cost, low cost. And then the third solution is all cloud service. So fully managed by AI service with scalable infrastructure, continuous updates and strong security, etc. There's still higher ongoing subscription costs. So you saw that Netflix, Hulu, all these different streaming places have subscriptions now, right? Because there's operation costs that we have to pay for. And so those are some of the options. Of course, it's not all comprehensive options, but these are some of the options that you can provide. And one of the things that you can do, and you're going to be doing this later on, if for this you're doing a cursory analysis right now, but you're going to actually do more in depth. So the more you do the research, it's going to be better, because it'll be less work for you at the end, is cost benefit analysis. So go through option 1, option 2, option 3, include upfront costs, ongoing maintenance and training, expected benefit. So by investing in this, what is the efficiency, cost benefit, and user satisfaction? You're thinking, AI has not been implemented at public health places, a little bit just to do some work. but it's not a system-wide adoption right now. How do you figure this out? Well, like I said, what you can do is extrapolate. So do the literature if you go to the library and see a different industry, and you can extrapolate what the cost would be, what's the initial investment, what are the benefits, and that's how you could do some of the cost benefit analysis. It doesn't have to be exact, but you have to show some future costs and benefits. Option 2, I talked to you about low initial investment, but higher IT integration, meaning it might be very small investment upfront, but the investment is going to be ongoing. It is cost effective, it is flexible. However, we are unsure of all the costs at this point. And then the third option, the ongoing subscription, there's no guarantee that the subscription rate is not going to increase. So you have to talk about that. And the benefits. So cost benefit analysis. So at the end of the day, you're going to need to have actual dollar signs of what it's going to be. And if it's not implemented in your industry, what you want to do is look through the literature to give some estimates. So lastly, what you need to do with any kind of plan is what you recommend is the most viable option. So a lot of times when you give option, they're going to ask you, okay, so Dr. Love, which one do you recommend, or which one would you choose? So you have to give justification of why it is the best fit, considering culture, structure, and goals, and also the implementation plan. Is it high level timeline, resources are key steps? How much staff do you need? How much time do you need is going to be very important. So what you want to do before giving any kind of recommendation, so going back to the example, so the first option, if it's best with the department needs right away, real time, high accuracy, etc., but it has a high upfront cost and long-term benefit is very clear. However, a lot of times people don't want to wait 5 years to see a return in investment. You want to just make sure that when you have different options, you want to talk about different evidences of why, and then give your best recommendation. And then lastly, in terms of implementation, you want to show what the implementation will require. So for example, going back to the example of my public health is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like what is it going to look like? Because people want to look at the timeline, and that's what you're going to show for your recommendation. So I'm going to stop here.